Oh, man, no. It's one of the 23 commandments of 4. Don't mix dairy and baby.
I'm Brodor, and this is Why We Game. This episode's guest is Molly Zeff, CEO and co-founder at Flying Leap Games. She's also a game designer with, if I did my research correctly, 4 games to her credit. Molly, how are you?
Doing great.
Now, we are not recording video, just the audio for the podcast, so you can feel free to move around, gesture, consume beverages, food, etc. And of course, none of this is live, so feel free to, if you're like, oh my gosh, that industry secret was too juicy, I cannot share it.
Well, I will be sure to make a lot of funny facial expressions that none of your listeners will ever get to see, and show them exciting cards from the game they'll never get to see unless they go on our site. How about that?
Perfect, because that's ideal, because it will draw traffic to it will drive traffic to your site. So that is perfect. How are things treating you during this pandemic?
Honestly, I've been really excited today, in particular. I had a big transition from last week to this week because I was on vacation in Nashville and Memphis, just going dancing at lots of clubs and seeing lots of music museums, and just the ability to do that again during the pandemic without fear is very exciting. I'm quadruple boosted because I had a booster shot and COVID, so I feel pretty good. And this week I'm just getting back into work on my 6th game. So I just actually have a 5th game has been stuck at port for 9 weeks, but it's coming out any day now. It's called Just Tell Me What to Do. So you could say we have 4.5, but really a 5th game that is already lots of pre-orders lined up. Just Tell Me What to Do, a party game of all the advice you never needed, is our one that was due out last fall, but because of the shipping crisis is coming any day, for many weeks now. And then I've been really pumped about getting to start work again on our 6th one. And I happened to have 2 calls earlier today where I was talking to a couple of our partners about that game's launch this late summer. It is called How to Lose a Guy in 1 DM. It's about all the inappropriate comments that men make to women over dating apps, inspired by true events in the lives of many of my girlfriends. But it's the sassy responses that women wish they had come up with in the moment to respond to those wildly inappropriate and ridiculous comments that men make.
That is brilliant. I'm gonna start right out of the gate with a big question. Are you so ambitious that the meager hobby industry is a stepping stone and you're trying to kick in the door of big box like Target and Walmart?
Oh, 100%. Yeah, I actually had the only consolidator that works with Target in the industry reach out to me just about Jewish Car Revoked to get that into Target as soon as we can. Hopefully by Hanukkah this year, but it might have to be next year. And as far as other games, we are working with another consolidator, greater than different game companies in the industry, also known as Flat River Group, since they were bought out recently, to bring some of our games into Target if we can build up sales to that level. So 100%. And How to Lose a Guy in 1 DM, we also want to explore partnerships with Bumble or Coffee Meets Bagel or other dating apps as well.
That's brilliant. So when you become enormous, are you going to remember the little people here in St. Louis and the small folks in Gamma?
Always. It is built into my company's DNA to actively live out the idea on a personal level that a rising tide should lift more boats. It never lift all boats, but I spend a lot of time coaching primarily men actually in the industry, since that's most of the industry, for free. And sometimes they occasionally help me back too, which is great. And this past year, I founded a diversity fellowship to improve diversity in industry. And so I do spend a lot of my time for free supporting designers of backgrounds that are extremely underrepresented in the industry. And so I will not stop that work, and we'll continue that work of, advancing diversity for the little people and for people who are underrepresented well into making our games a big success.
I want to drill down into that, but first I want to get a little bit more background on Molly the gamer. When did you discover gaming?
Oh gosh, when I was like 0. I mean, I was making up games as far back as I can remember on the playground. And I hate it now, but I definitely loved, Chutes and Ladders and Candyland as a little kid. And then when I was growing up, I spent many, many years losing to lots of wonderful games. I'm the youngest in a big family. So when you're the youngest, you just get used to losing over and over and over again, which is actually a useful skill for being an entrepreneur, since half of entrepreneurship is just failing really well and then moving forward. The earliest best games that I really loved were probably Taboo and Balderdash. And my co-founder and I actually grew up in St. Louis together playing those all the time.
So you grew up in St. Louis. For those of you who are St. Louis listeners, and I know you're out there, Molly, what high school did you go to?
Oh, geez. Really? Did you have to?
I do have to. And there's a reason why I had to, but I want to get to that because I need to hear you say the name of this fiendish place.
I went to Clayton High School, which for those of you who are not from St. Louis is why I joined the Facebook group in the early years of Facebook in 2004 that was called I Went to a Public School That Might As Well Have Been a Private School.
I can concur. For the people who are in my close circles that grew up with me, know that I was referred to it as Clayton. Like I thought it was this wicked, evil place of these powerful blue bloods. Now, my dad's side of the family are wealthy East Coast, Northeast Coast blue bloods who came here to the Midwest, and my moms are all white trash from the wrong side of the fence. And the people at Clayton, I always found to be very intimidating, like my dad's siblings, because we are the black sheep of the black sheep. But they were all so goddamn smart. And so you would face them in debate. Now, I did policy, and I know you did Lincoln Douglas, which was more, one-on-one sort of a freeform thing that I did not have the discipline to understand. But I rocked at policy because I argue well, I can think on my feet, and I can speak concisely and quickly. Anyhow, I was always intimidated by the people who were from your school. There was one team in particular that always kicked the shit out of us. From my freshman year until my senior year was the only time that we ever beat them. Any which way. I find that impressive. But then you go from Clayton High School to Yale. So I'm a bit intimidated by your intellectual achievement.
I don't even know what I'm supposed to say to that other than a lot of brilliant people go to many non-Ivy League schools.
I know, but there is what is the prestige, the opposite of stigma, right? There is a prestige to going to an Ivy League university, right? Now, but then when I look at your background, and forgive me for sounding too stalkery, but you seem like such a good and charitable and giving person in your efforts as well.
Yeah, I mean, and just going back to what you said about Clayton, I think the actions of Clayton people that stuck out to me over the years were really about how people treated each other. And I would say Yale was the same way. I met some of the best people, the kindest, the most understanding, the gentlest souls I've ever met in my life at college and at Yale School of Management, where I went 7 years later. And I think when you're in a setting in which, first of all, when everyone's a nerd, then no one's a nerd, right? Because being a nerd is countercultural. And so for one thing, people grow in their confidence at a school like that. But for another, some of them came from settings where they were a little bit of an outlier, maybe even, a little bit socially didn't fit in. And so people, I think, become kinder when they don't fit in, right? And so the moment you meet a bunch of Yaleys, you feel totally at home because we are, I'll just brag for a moment, we are probably one of the nicest possible group of, pretty smart people you can imagine. I mean, all my friends are pretty smart, but they're also like normal people who get freaking stressed out by their 2-year-olds during the pandemic and who, decide to be a stay-at-home mom and don't know what they're going to do after 10 years at home with 3 kids. Everybody's normal and human once you actually meet them and see their stress and their stories and their pain, right? Clayton's actions, the thing that stuck out to me when you mentioned the school I went to, my mom and I spent a lot of time fighting the school board. There were some parents who wanted to get rid of the DSEG program. That's the voluntary student transfer program that brings kids in from the city. So quick little factoid for those of you who like numbers, 22% of Clayton was Black when I went there. 18% were busing in the city. So they wanted to bring our school from 22% to 4% Black by getting rid of the only way that school was maintaining any level of diversity. And so my mom and I fought the school board for some months, with other people. And the year after I went to college, someone calls me when I'm in a hotel room, someone from my soccer team, and said, "We're organizing a walkout. Can you advise us?" So I gave them advice on how to do the walkout. The next day, 700 out of 830 kids walk out of the school to protest getting rid of the program. And that and other activism we had done led to them not cutting the program, just getting rid of 1% of it, which sucks for that 1%. But that's Clayton for you. I mean, those kids really stood up for the minority kids when they were supposed to get sent to pretty crappy city schools, to be honest. And Clayton is known for one of the best schools in the area. The city schools are really awful in some cases. And so I'm very proud of having come from the background, not because people were smart or because of any grades or because we had good APs, we had all that, but because through my mom, I learned to fight the man a little bit and keep the, the value of diversity alive at our school.
I'm going to ask you a dumb question, not because I'm hitting on you, but because recently I have become obsessed with astrology because of my Call of Cthulhu game. What is your sign?
Well, now I'm going to ask you, what do you think it is? Because if you know anything about astrology, you should be able to guess, right?
I don't have any idea. I am just now scratching the surface. And so I haven't even done much reading at all other than some cursory descriptions like on Wikipedia and that sort of research. But I wanted to do an experiment with my player characters because one of their professors is a villain and is tracking their star charts because they're like the Scooby Gang and getting all curious. Anyway, too much about me. I have no idea. You're intelligent, but you're super open-minded, right? So you're one of those people that thinks on two tracks because you've got a good listening track, but you also are picking up detail and formulating what you're going to say next while you're listening, which most people don't do that. Most people wait to talk. So your whatever sign has that sort of analytical, but not Gemini, not like two people, but two-brained.
It's Gemini, and I think the entire sign system is a load of crap, but it is Gemini.
It is. Okay. All right. Well, so there you go. I'm nothing if not usually very, very wrong. Shitting the bed is something that I do with great aptitude. I'm adroit at pooping my pants.
Great.
Yeah.
I'm sure your family appreciates that.
Yeah, no, they do. They do not. Again, most of the family does not appreciate my vulgarity, but that's beside the point. When did you discover what I would call weird gaming, right? So if I can use the intelligence world expression read in. So people who play chess, checkers, backgammon, Go, Pente, Monopoly, etc. Those are games, and that's great. But for someone to be read in, I'm thinking at least you've got your toes in the water of things like Carcassonne and Catan in more of the hobby niche of the market. When did you discover that aspect?
Do you mean basically light to medium strategy games?
Yeah. When did you go from buying games in a box store or a traditional store, toy store sort of place and start buying games from what would be a gaming store or a hobby shop? You know what I mean? Something that most people generally don't venture into.
Sure. I had no idea the game industry had exploded like it has the last 15 years or so until I started turning my one game into a company, which was around 2014, and started doing market research. And I would say I didn't really understand there were even board game stores, that they existed. No one had ever introduced them to me. I just never heard of them until I actually incorporated the company with my co-founder, John Cannon, also from St. Louis, around 2017, August 2017. So really the time that I got into, serious, lighter, but often medium level strategy games wasn't until I joined the industry, because I didn't even know what to look for. I didn't know they were out there. And I would say that would have been, like 2018. So very recent. I'm a very recent hobby gamer. I've always been a casual gamer since as far back as I can remember. And I've always played some level of strategy games. Like I started playing chess when I was 11. So I did like strategy games, and I was on the chess team in 6th grade, blah, blah, blah. But like beyond like chess and Chinese checkers and Othello, some really well-known ones, I wasn't exploring some of the really exciting and unique stuff out there until I became a full-time entrepreneur.
Why did you decide then so quickly to transition from industry fan to industry professional? Wing It, that was your first game?
Mm-hmm.
And when you were marketing and trying to sell Wing It to distributors and to retailers, you had developed that prior to discovering the hobby aspect of the game industry.
Yeah.
Okay.
We started developing Wing It in 2010 together. And from day one, I knew that I wanted to sell 1 million copies, but we were working on just one product for a few years. And then I needed to turn the product into a company.
You started the game and you thought, well, I want to get this into places like Target, Walmart, etc. Right? Just for, now you smiled one, now not Walmart, no? Okay, so
no, because you don't go from 0 to 200 miles per hour like that. I knew there was steps in between,
Right. So you just had to discover what those steps were. So like a good project manager, you saw your destination and said, okay, now I need to work backwards, right? So my first step is a game. My final step is world conquest. What are the steps in between? How do I figure out what step 2 is? And so along that journey, you discover dorks like me who play Dungeons and Dragons and Carcassonne and Magic the Gathering. I know we're not dorks. We're wonderful, great people.
No, I'm saying I didn't need to discover you. I went to a school with tons of people like you.
Yeah, okay, got it. All right.
And my co-founder had been in a 2-year D&D campaign when we were launching our first game. What led me to really discover the hobby game store network was actually a total fluke. Because of one night at a bar at my very first Gamma trade show, I was able to sell out of our first line of 2,000 games, our first print run, of 2,000 games. And so it only took one night at a bar and some cheese. And if you're interested in the story, I can share how that happened. I
do want to hear that story because 1, I find that stuff interesting. 2, I love behind the scenes Gamma at the bar, particularly when it was in Vegas, sort of stories. I love that stuff. And I often will be, if I can afford to go to GTS, be a fly on the wall. So yes, please indulge me.
Well, so back in 2017, I got laid off of a job 6 weeks into moving to New York City. So my rent had nearly doubled. My income had gone up slightly from 80 to 85,000, and then it went to 0. And I sat in a park for a while. I said, you know what? I've already had this game for ages. We've been talking about launching this company. We've done a lot of the groundwork in business school and 2 different classes. I should just do it. And so I sat in a park for 4 hours. I cried. I talked to my friends, my dad, my sister, and decided to go for it. And we ran the Kickstarter. We had no idea what we were doing, which is actually my business motto is I have no idea what I'm doing. And I like to wear that on a shirt and say, this is my motto. And I'm very proud of it because the way that you grow it in any field is to say, what the hell am I doing? And then other people are like, I can tell you what to do. And so that's a lot of my life is just getting advice from people who are smarter than me or know more than me. And if you flash forward, we were going to individual stores in individual cities for a few months after Wing had just come in of winter of 2017, 2018. And I had it signed with Hit Point Sales, one of the main consolidators in the industry. And they said, you can get in with us at our booth at either Origins, which is a consumer-facing show, or Gamma. I recommend you go to Origins. But my 4th cousin, once removed bat mitzvah, was in Brooklyn the weekend of Origin. I said, dang it, I am not missing a family event in Brooklyn. I'm living in Brooklyn right now. It's the only event that will probably ever be in Brooklyn while I'm living here. I'm going to that and I'll go to Gamma instead. So I went to Gamma that March. And the amount I had in my bank account at that time, because I'd pretty much worked through all the savings I had from selling my car and from my last jobs, the amount of money I had in my bank account was my rent for the next month plus $25. So I went to Gamma pretty broke. I missed the only networking event on that Sunday night because my flight was canceled. Oh. The only big networking event of the week was a Sunday night. Not canceled. My flight was postponed. So I missed the only big networking event. I came in late Sunday night, and Monday I saw on the calendar that there was a retailer event Monday night at Edge Nightclub at the Peppermill Resort and Casino in Reno, Nevada, which is the godforsaken place that Gamma for some reason always holds its shows. And I went to the grocery store that night and got some groceries and came back. And I decided to walk to save a little money. So I walked 2.4 miles with a bag of groceries. And I went into this nightclub with my St. Louis retailers from Fantasy Shop, which was one of the first 11 stores we ever sold to in just 4 cities. I said, okay, what did my dad teach me? He said, this bank robber was asked by a reporter, why do you rob banks? And he said, well, that's where the money is. So why did I go to the Edge nightclub? Because the retailers were already there for an event. They were all in one place. And so I went there and I got, asked immediately, how do you like the event? Here's your free drink token. I was like, I wasn't at the event. She's like, oh, you can still have a free drink. I went over to a little inlet where there were a bunch of retailers sitting and I began to chat with them. And I would do a really soft sell. Every once in a while I'd say, when we made our game, but it was a really, really soft sell. And then at some point, Matt Parker from Batcave Games out of Vancouver said, why don't I take a look at your games while you eat your cheese? Because I had cheese I really, really wanted to eat. And I just love eating cheese. So I started eating my cheese, like a big block of cheese, just straight. That's how I take my cheese usually. And drinking my drink, sitting on the floor of the bar, because that's where I like to sit sometimes.
If you will, since we've teased the audience long enough with the name Wing It, as you're telling the story, can you incorporate what the game is? Thank you.
So, no problem. So he said to me, can I take a look at your game, Wing It, which was the main game that we had launched a few months earlier, just like this creative, weird, funny storytelling game, big party game that had done decently well on Kickstarter, like a few hundred copies, not amazing. And I said, yeah, here's the game. I start eating my cheese. Matt looks at the back of the box and says, are you on PayPal? I'd PayPal you for 10 of these right now. And 10 was a big order then. I mean, since then we'll sell sometimes the, indie chains, 60, 192 at one point at a time. So he went ahead and said, I could sell 5 of these tomorrow. I could sell 5 of these right now. Watch me. He gets everyone's attention in that inlet at the bar. And it's a little sitting place where it turns out they're all part of this group of 50 of the largest indie retailers in the U.S. And he plays the game. He teaches the game for me. And it's like, pinch me, please. In Annie, the musical, she says, pinch me, please. It's like, this is amazing that this is happening to me. He teaches them the game and they play and they give me advice till 2:15 in the morning for about 4 hours straight, at least. In fact, we got kicked out of that Edge nightclub. We had to go to the big white couches there. Yeah, I convinced someone to stay with us who was going to go to bed. And they said, we like you because a lot of people come into stores and they just act like they know what they're all about. They won't take our advice. And later they said, we like you because you're authentic. You just sat on the floor and ate your cheese. And I was like, that's because that's what I want to do in life, is sit on the floor and eat my cheese. And so what I realized from that night is like authenticity is actually really important in the industry. People can see it. And they also buy because of who you are, not just who the game is. And suddenly the next day after that night at the bar, I was getting orders from like Florida. I couldn't, people were typing, I couldn't make, the game a trade show this year, but I'd like to buy 24 copies. I heard about your game. And I found out later, because I sold 1,000 of those in 4 weeks, and that was the end of our print run of 2,000. I found out that Matt had talked about me and the whole story of the cheese and playing for hours and who I was on a Facebook group with other retailers. And because he had done that, they all found out who I was. And suddenly we were selling, half of a print run in 4 weeks, and we were getting an order for 48 that I couldn't even fulfill, right? So that's a story of how I found out that hobby stores were a great way to go for party games. I had no inclination that I was going to target, a week after making a game, or even necessarily a few years. There obviously are steps in between, right? And and since then that's been our main model. Is I visited in person or go to Gamma or called retail stores like crazy. And I would say if I could give a piece of advice to listeners out there who are making their first game or two, one of the most effective things you can ever do is visit stores. With the nearly 300 stores I visited, I have about a 49% conversion or resale rate. And with Gamma, when I go and I come back and I call stores up, I have a 62% conversion rate. So it is really important in this industry, if you're going to sell to hobby stores, that is, to have that personal touch.
Was that something that just happened on accident? Was there some part of you that willed it into existence? Did you do like many professional athletes do? And did you envision some sort of success? So how much of it was luck? Obviously, there was a tremendous amount of hard work, but was it at the other extreme a Rube Goldbergian sort of contraption that you built that, doesn't look like it should work and yet works splendidly?
The answer to your either or question is an emphatic yes. By which I mean that I, of course, went to a bar where a bunch of retailers were already going to be to meet a bunch of retailers, right? That was completely intentional. To meet as many retailers as I could in a night. I could never have known that some of the most successful retailers on the country were all that tightly networked. I had no idea of that. So that was a total accident that I happened to pitch to the right group of retailers. Had I gone up to 3 other retailers who weren't that tightly connected, it wouldn't have happened that way, right? I mean, as easily. So that part was luck. But I believe that if you put yourself out there enough, you intentionally create luck. So like, for example, this fall when I was launching Jewish Card Revoke, our game inspired and based on the best-selling Black Card Revoke, and yes, we do have a license, it's all legal. That game I knew could be a real hit with a lot of the Jewish media. And so I pitched it to 14 Jewish papers and got 2 interviews. And one of the interviews I happened to land, where I was connected to an editor, one of those papers I happened to land is the JTA, the Jewish Telegraph Agency. That's the AP, the Associated Press of Jewish Media. So because I only got 2 interviews, it seems like, oh, that's not so successful, 2 out of 14. But because I got that one interview, it was reprinted in the Cleveland Jewish News. It was reprinted in the St. Louis Post-Dispatch. It was reprinted in 3 Israeli newspapers. People started seeing it all over the internet. And for the cost of 2 interviews, which is just time, I was able to sell several hundred copies, right? So, you create luck, right?
I understand. You seem like someone who is methodical.
I mean, to some extent, I also just like to show up at bars and talk with everybody I can. If that's a methodology, sure. That's pretty much what I tell people, in a lot of my different talks and advice calls and presentations. I did an 1.5-hour presentation at Gamma that someone said was the most useful thing he went to at Gamma that people still write me about from the recording. And one of the things I said was just go to the bar. A lot of business happens between 1 and 4 a.m. at Gamma. And, you can't make a connection across a table in the exhibit hall the way you can over a drink at 2 a.m.
I was at that presentation. I actually recorded it and still have a copy of that presentation. No, it was really very, very strong. And then I had the luxury, I think that same day, I saw Justin Gary do a presentation. And my mind was just blown. I was like, I could barely walk after listening to yours. And then I went into Justin Gary's and somebody had to give me smelling salts. It was done.
Nice.
Well, if I can, then with Gamma, the diversity in gaming initiative that you're involved in, can you tell me a little bit more about that? Because that is not something that I generally track because I look like the majority of the hobby.
Sure. If you walked into Gamma 3-4 years ago, my first Gamma, I guess, was 2018, so about 4 years ago, which seems like forever and also about a day ago, you could count the number of people who don't look like us. So for people who don't know, I'm both a majority and minority. So I'm white. I'm also an observant Jewish woman. And, in Boston, that does not make me unique, but in the industry, that makes me extraordinarily unique. So I have a strong experience identifying with both majority and minority identities. And what the experiences like affects my, my life in the game industry as well a lot. So I would say this, the diversity fellowship grew out of a desire, literally to just diversify the industry, but also to make it so that nobody has to walk into rooms at Gamma, as many minorities do, and feel like they're the only one in the room who looks like them or who has their particular, sexual identity or gender identity. To give you one specific story that drives me a lot, and this is just a very personal story, a Black media professional in the game industry walked up to me. I think it was either Gamma 2019 or 2020. And he said, "Hey, you'll get this because you're Jewish. I am the only Black man here." And I went into my room and just cried in my hotel room. And he was just so lonely. It was so hard to know that the industry didn't have room for people like him by and large, for whatever reason. And so his experience of feeling so lonely in the industry, and I felt that often as an observant Jew, in different settings because people don't always understand some elements of that experience. His experience really drives me to say, let's create a world in which the game industry actually looks like society and not like it did 20 years ago. I mean, we're kind of stuck, So when you walk into a convention, at least there is my diversity, but I could count on one hand the number of Black female designers I know. And if we started together counting the number of white male designers we know, we wouldn't even have enough toes and fingers, right? And no one's trying to intentionally create that reality. It's created by a lot of unintentional signals and factors in society that, that are too broad and diverse to get into on this show. But basically, with the Horizons Fellowship, we believe that we could plant the seed of getting in, just really energetic, talented folks who have already started retail stores, already started publishing companies, bring them to Gamma, have as a pilot program as part of this fellowship, run the fellowship again, create networks of people who are from diverse backgrounds to work with and support each other, and then gradually plant the seeds of growing diversity, initially through this one fellowship. There's actually a similar effort going on in Canada as well. And what I would say is the fellowship is just the beginning. We have a whole diversity team working on other kinds of initiatives as well. And one thing that I've seen happen in the industry that's really awesome is how do you make the industry itself more welcoming? So, for example, my friend Dave Salisbury in Manchester, UK, did a whole workshop this past year on how do you code a store to be welcoming? Because if I repeatedly walk into a space and only see and I have done this many a time because I've visited 300 stores, if I only see an entire group of men who look at me like, oh, like a woman in gaming, and like, believe me, like my own co-designer on How to Lose a Guy in 1DM said that he was working with me to a male person, to another man, who basically responded like, oh, there are women in gaming, like as if like that's shocking, you know, like we want to create a world where like that doesn't happen, where you're like the one Black woman I think who was actually at Gamma a few years ago doesn't come away and say like, wow, people were really not treating me well at that show. You know, we want to have that experience where it's common enough to see people who look like you and who don't look like you if you're white, that it's not like the outlying person in a room who suddenly has to like represent Black people in the industry. So that's, I think, a lot of the driving force. This is, by the way, all my personal opinion. This is not Gamma's opinion. This is what I'm driven by, is creating a more diverse industry. I would also say that there are obvious and proven benefits of diversity, but one thing I learned from business school was that diverse teams universally come up with better outcomes on any given problem. Because when you have diverse viewpoints, you come up with better, more creative solutions to those problems. And so that's one thing I've seen, even from our small team working on the fellowship alone, which is a subset of a larger diversity team. Even our small team, you know, the 5 of us have fairly different backgrounds. And yeah, we created a better fellowship because of that. So I just want to make sure people know when we talk about diversity, this is very multidimensional. So we look in the Horizons Fellowship in our selection of people and just in, you know, how we want to, you know, promote diversity in industry, gender, sexuality, ethnicity or race, and ability. So those are the 4 main areas. We did originally include religion. That didn't actually come up with our fellowship applications at all. And the other 4 areas were more important anyway. But again, that's gender, sexuality, ethnicity/race, and ability. So those are the 4 areas that our fellows cover. And actually some people cover multiple areas. And we also did something that I advocated for and everybody really liked the idea, was on board, which is anybody who didn't get the fellowship, but was still clearly a qualified applicant, was classified as a rising star. The rising stars won't, you know, get the free ride to Gamma. They don't get one-on-one mentorship, but they get access to all of the AMAs, the Ask Me Anythings, and all of the coaches' emails and all of Army emails. So they do get any of the free coaching that they want as well.
That's very cool. I don't want to sound pandering, but I certainly am curious. What do the people in the industry who are doughy, Middle Western, you know, Caucasian men that want to help, other than providing a platform like I've done here for you, well, and I mean, shit, let's be honest, you're the one doing me a favor by helping me create content. But honestly, other than interviewing you and getting the word out there, the people that want to put skin in the game, how do they do that?
That's an easy one, actually. First of all, you hit on a key part already. Providing a platform to spread the word about a fellowship existing, especially when we're bringing in new people next year. No matter who you are, you've got some platform. Like literally, if you have no company social media, you still have your personal social media page. You have people in your network. So spreading the word about programs like this is, you know, an obvious one. But another huge one, and we definitely tap into our fair share of white male coaches for this fellowship, is to just say, I have knowledge someone doesn't have. I can spread that knowledge through an avenue like this.
I have many years of retail experience, and I have many years of mental illness. So whichever front you would like to relate gaming to, mental illness or sales, I'm in.
That's perfect. So there we go. So in my recruitment of coaches for our AMA sessions, which are Ask Me Anything sessions, for people who don't know that term, I tap into everyone. It doesn't matter what you look like. So we've had people from very diverse backgrounds, including many a white man, teach on our AMA sessions. So literally just coming in and sharing about the industry and chiming in when you have something to say. Teaching people is the biggest thing. This is where I was talking about earlier that I believe the value at the core of our company is that, you know, a rising tide can lift all boats, or can lift many boats. Doesn't always, and honestly, proactively supporting designers of underrepresented backgrounds is something that I took on a couple years or so ago with my own Instagram platform for Flying Late Games every week or so. I mean, I ran the gamut of many of them for a while, but basically, you know, would every week or so would feature a different Black designer from Elizabeth Hargrave's list of Black designers. So literally using your platform to promote people's work, and then also using your knowledge to say, I know X, someone else doesn't know X. Let's make sure to clear that, to solve that knowledge gap. And that's simple, whether it's through your podcast, whether it's through your, again, any Twitter or TikTok or Facebook platform or newsletter can talk about a fellowship and say, hey, there's this fellowship happening. Please spread the word, let people know so they can apply.
I'm quite serious about helping in terms of both just promoting it via this interview, but also I would even commit to be sober for you for the AMA. But I would absolutely be willing to talk about a variety of things related to gaming, from sales to depression to growing up as an abused child and what a difference gaming made to me. But we can talk more about that because I want this to be about you. But I definitely would love to participate on some level.
Yeah, that would be awesome. Yeah, and we actually don't have enough media people involved. So that would be really cool to think about how to incorporate media people more.
I want to deviate, but before I do, I'm going to take one step back to wing it, and I'm going to pitch Cards Against Humanity without regret. That's, I think, Wing It. You have this wonderful party game that doesn't make you feel dirty or regret texts that you sent. So when you run for political office in 15 years and those Cards Against Humanity texts come out, or the conversations you had about it, or even the people who made the game, taking some steps back. So if you want a regret-free, great party experience, Wing It is the direction.
Yeah, I'll just add to that if you remember one word to associate with Wing It, it's Pampers, which are adult diapers. One of my favorite reviews from Amazon is a woman playing with her teenage grandkids, and she said, teenage and pre-teenage grandkids, and she said, this game should include a Pampers warning for the older generation. And others for both Wing It and $1 Million Doodle have said, we were on the floor laughing. We had to stop playing because we were laughing so hard. We were laughing hysterically. We were returning to in-jokes throughout the night and beyond. Those are the kind of reviews that our games get. And for the, NSFW, not safe for work crowd, our games become NSFW all the time. I could not share in a PG-13 film four of the 5 companies that my Gen Con group did playing the $1 Million Doodle one night. So there's definitely plenty of room for creating companies in $1 Million Doodle, like Bondage Bears was one. Use teddy bears in your BDSM so that you overcome your need to sexually harass women.
Oh, no,
Bondage bears is a good alternative.
I immediately just thought, when you said bondage bears, I thought about husky, hairy, gay men in bondage. That's just...
There you go.
Yeah.
That's another view.
Yeah.
So just so people have a little background, in the $1 Million Doodle, in one line, you're creating funny, weird companies by building on each other's creativity to create, a company name, a slogan, an online review, a logo, and then you're pitching them. And so someone combines, you always combine 2 images. Someone combined something fluffy, and they chose a teddy bear, and handcuffs.
Right.
And they created bondage bears. And I pitched that as a healthier alternative to sexually harassing people at conventions.
Brilliant. Let's put a pin in sexually harassing people at conventions, because before we get into that, I want to ask about Jewish Card Revoked, which is, 1, do I have permission to buy it? And 2, why am I so reticent and uncomfortable? Like, I am afraid to tell people that I own and with consistency watch my copy of Blazing Saddles. Like, I'm terrified in today's world. I don't want to have a copy of Jewish Card Revoked because I don't want people to think that I'm some sort of neo-Nazi and that it's a wank,
Okay, so first of all, you want permission. You have it. Granted, done.
Great, thank you. Yeah, I just wanted to make sure that it was cool because I don't want to be that guy.
So here's the thing. When you buy a game or a book or a movie that is going to give you a better, more interesting, and frankly, more hilarious, in-depth understanding of a culture, you're actually making yourself more cultured. You're understanding, like, what's funny to this group. If only Black people ever watched Black comedians, first of all, they wouldn't be nearly as successful, but second of all, you'd have a lot less understanding of what it is that culture likes to mock about themselves. And what better way to get to know someone than seeing, like, what we like to make fun of about ourselves, right? I think that's a great way to get to know people and their culture.
But it's not for me. And I have had people who do not look, for example, I love the Boondocks. I love that cartoon. It's fucking brilliant, right? However, I don't quote it. I don't talk about it. And I have had people tell me that, no, man, that show's not for you.
So you're wrong. That's the thing. I playtested the game and played it later with 4 non-Jewish groups, and I definitely chose certain cards that there wouldn't be like too much of a lack of knowledge in that group. But people loved it.
Right.
One of the best people at it said he could not play it, and he was amazing at it. He was hilarious. I took video of him and posted online. So I would say you won't know all of the cards, but you'll get something out of 80-90% of them. And frankly, there is no Jewish person in the world who knows all of the references on these cards, because we had the game invented by myself and 6 people I hired to do development and editing. And we all come from such diverse backgrounds that we don't know all the cultural references, which frankly range from Broadway to Sephardi food. And nobody has the cultural knowledge of all of those things of Jewish culture that we highlighted. And then I would also say, given that non-Jews definitely played it with each other, sure, like it's not a game you'd like necessarily seek out to play with non-Jews. But I would say much like Seinfeld was a popular show because he was like emphasizing Jewish neuroticism in a way that like any Jew from New York or Boston can recognize, right? Or anybody who lives in New York City can recognize, because everybody knows some neurotic Jewish person in New York City. I would say in that same way, there are enough elements of Jewish culture that have made it into mainstream TV or Broadway or food or language. I mean, the word schmuck, the word klutz is Yiddish, so enough elements have made it into mainstream culture. Krusty the Clown had a bar mitzvah, I believe, right? Ross Geller was clearly a nerdy Jewish man, so there's enough overlap between mainstream culture and Jewish culture and we made sure that kind of stuff made the cards too, by the way. Monty Python is in there. Monty Python isn't just watched by Jews, right? And so I would say that you absolutely could enjoy, and along the way, like you might be like, what is that? What does it mean? And you'll Google it, right? So yeah, I would disagree that it's just for Jews. And actually Black Card Revoked's team also wants to get away from that just for Black people too. You're going to get more of the cultural references if you're from that culture, obviously. But that doesn't mean you don't enjoy Seinfeld.
Can I say something utterly inappropriate? What you should do is have a proactive, inappropriate campaign. Like you should have, come on, Shiksa, play Jewish Card Revoked. Come on, Goy Boy, let's play some cards. Something like that to let us know, because so men are dumb and white guys are the dumbest of men in terms of you need to hit me over the head with, oh, you don't want me to, oh, I'm not supposed to grab your butt. Sorry, I'm an idiot. You know what I mean? I need you to punch me in the mouth or spray me in the eyes with mace. I mean, we're savages. We're monsters, right? So we need something ridiculous like that in order to know that it's okay to buy the game.
Sure, I would lose more people than I'd gain probably in marketing quite like that.
No, I know. And I know often my humor like that drives people away. But in reality, as dumb as it sounds, people just want to know, man, if I'm not being a skeeve if I buy your game and I play it, you know what I mean? And
I think the core of the idea is excellent.
It's just some people, and I'm not speaking for myself, I'll play whatever, whenever, and say whatever. But I know people would be apprehensive to do so because they don't want to be assumed like, and I talk about white fragility, but people are terrified for that scarlet R, man. I mean, they're terrified that they're going to get pilloried in the public and they're going to get branded with that R.
Yeah. I mean, I would say that in the privacy of your own home, no one's watching what games are on your shelf either. So
well, now, I mean, if you look at my company logo, I don't think everyone is being watched, but I am confident that everyone is constantly being recorded.
Right. But who's going to say you brought a Jewish game there if you're anti-Semitic with no additional evidence? Right.
Well, until the NSA decides to dig up my file and finally go through all the, I can't even pronounce the gigas of data that they've saved up in Utah. But enough for my crazy conspiracy theories. Let's transition into being a woman in the gaming industry. I know some great designers, some wonderful retailers. I just did a video that I released recently on my shitty YouTube page about thanking feminism and about how I am a product or a byproduct of feminism in the industry because my wife kicks ass professionally. And so I can pursue this quasi professionally amateur sort of hobby. But I know from my experience as a retailer that it was very, very difficult for women who worked in the stores because you are generally met with one of two extremes, a wedding proposal or just absolute dismissal. And I can tell you a true story, but again, I want this to be about your experience. I know you had mentioned, during the pre-interview that you've had a number of instances that you've run into. So can you tell us about your experiences and has it gotten better?
Better since when? Since I started or
no. Since you started, have things improved? And I know it's a short period of time as we've already established, but I'm curious.
Sure. So I'll share a few specific incidents to explain because that's more interesting to hear the stories first. And kind of offer some framing around that. So here's a great story for you. So I visit stores, as I've mentioned earlier on the show. And by and large, I'm treated extremely well at stores. And by and large, by the way, I'm treated extremely well by men in the industry. I mean, I get support, advice, friendship from, and I've been hosted by male and female retailers and their families to stay with them. And I want to flag that first. Most people are very inappropriate and wonderful. There's some bad eggs out there, right? So I was out in Colorado and I entered a store during one of my trips. And, this big military dude is taking me around his store and talking about how his customers are kind of a mess or whatever. And then he says, let's get a picture because I want to promote the hell out of you. I was like, all right, that's kind of a weird thing to say, but sure. So we're taking a picture. And as he's taking a picture, the first customer of the day comes in. It's around noon. And he turns to the customer and says, oh, don't mind us. We were just having sex. And I'm thinking, where does that even come off as remotely inappropriate? It's not even funny, first of all. If you're going to make a sexist joke, at least make it mildly good. But it's not even funny. It's also just weird. We were taking a photo of ourselves not having sex, but also where does that leave you with the customer that you're joking about having sex with a game designer in your store, So that was an incident that I experienced. Another one on another trip touring around stores was a designer who was a minority background by ability. I won't say more than that, but he has a disability that no one else in the industry has as far as I know. At least according to his own account, was playing with a bunch of men at the front of the store, offers me a drink. I finally decided to give in, go grab a drink out of the fridge. And I hear him announce to all of his buddies at the table, and that, gentleman, is how you get a lady in the back, Minor things, inappropriate. It's not raping, God forbid, right? I have been touched, but not raped, thank God. I know people who have been, by the way. Women, for sure. So those are a couple incidents with store owners. And I would say, again, by and large, my experience with men has been excellent in the industry. So I don't want people to think that's representative at all. Another incident with one of our major distributors is with someone who, otherwise has been a friend and very supportive of my work. But for example, when we were out one time and I was warm, so I took off my sweater to change into my, long sleeve shirt, not change, but I had a long sleeve shirt under. And he said, oh, I like where this is going. And it was not the last time he made a comment about me undressing. And this is someone whose customer, let me put it this way. I really need this person as my customer because he is from a major distributor and he's also really supported me. And so I had finally made up my mind in 2020 actually, to talk to him at a show. And then it turned out his company wasn't coming to Gamma. So I didn't talk to him. But, those are minor things in comparison to what some women receive for sure. Over time, at least people are being more public about it. They're starting to talk about, if they haven't already, having, strict guidelines for conventions. I've heard of one person actually getting banned from coming to a show because of his prior actions with, I believe, women. So, I guess I'm seeing anecdotally a little bit of more conversation and more improvement. And, I'm sure some of us are familiar with the medium exposés that have come out as well, or some public statements that have been made on Facebook as well about certain men. And I have seen strong retaliation. There are just people who now won't publish those men's games or won't work with them or won't hire them. I'm not generally a fan of cancel culture at all. I do national depolarization work, working with people across the political spectrum. I like everyone to feel comfortable voicing their opinions. But if you rape someone, like, I'm okay with you not getting a gig again, So, in this way, I think that there's some room for industry-wide punishment. That's what it is. Like, let's be honest, it's just punishment. You are being punished for raping a woman or for touching her in that other way. And I'm perfectly fine with that as a woman. Having been touched inappropriately by a CEO, having been touched inappropriately by a toy designer at my first toy fair, 100% okay with some cancellation there. There's room for that. What I would say is that women are totally open about things among themselves, but that it is really hard to be public. So, for example, in my case, I might have had like a conversation one-on-one with someone, but it is terrifying because you think, well, what if you just quietly get let go as a client of that distributor? They never have to say anything to anyone about why it was actually happening. They could just say what's true, which is like, she's from a pretty small company. We're not earning a lot. Let's gradually cut her off. And that would be a completely valid reason to cut me off. And no one would ever know that the only reason he was incentivized to do that is because I complained to him, or complained to a supervisor. So we can be public all we want about having public statements. But at the end of the day, what I was told by a woman in the Toy Fair bathroom, in the New York Toy Fair bathroom, of a bar night, of a night out at New York Toy Fair 2018, still holds very true, which is that when you need the person behind the table to sign your game or to bring you on as a client for his distributor or to sign you into his store, one-off stores don't matter as much, but a distributor really does, then, you really are putting your personal values against your professional needs, and you need money and you need to succeed. And so I think I'm probably not the only one who's very quiet about things by and large.
I'm not suggesting that this is what we do, nor am I saying that it is an appropriate course of action. However, hypothetically, an argument could be made that because we have become more civilized, people who act poorly are much more comfortable to act poorly because they know that the friends and family of the person in question are no longer encouraged to be chivalrous and to pull that guy back behind a dumpster at that show and kick the shit out of him, right? Nobody says anything. Not a word is said. He knows what he did. You're not the only woman he did it to. He'll think about it, and we kick the shit out of him. Now, I'm not saying, Molly, that I would do that if I was a show, particularly if I was drinking with a bunch of guys. I know it is wrong to have such a visceral lust for vengeance like that, but I miss a time where it was okay to punch that guy in the face.
Oh, it is still in some circles. And one of my game designer friends who's male said, let us know if so-and-so does something to you. I mean, he didn't know who so-and-so was, but let me know if so-and-so does something to you, and we'll give him a talking to. It doesn't change the culture of that being okay. And I'm going to give you an example from my own culture in religious Judaism. Not in my branch of religious Judaism, but in a certain branch I won't name. People can figure out for themselves. There are what's called agunot, or women who are stuck as like not quite married, but not quite divorced, because a man won't issue them a divorce document, which is called a get, G-E-T. And there's no halakha or Jewish law making him give her a get. Sort of systemically, it's very hard to make him get one. But there are men who have and do, and this was on NPR, this is no secret, who have taken a man like that and held something hot against his penis and have forced him by putting something like a hot rod next to his penis to give his wife a divorce document. And that works one time, and it might scare a few other people. But it doesn't change the legal system in Judaism that is not making it easy for a woman to issue her own get, or to get her own get, right, without needing his approval. And so similarly with sexual harassment in the gay industry, or just in society in general, right, I think we need to change men. And I'm not to be sexist against all men, but I really do think we need to make it not okay to say certain comments. And I'll just say, I'm in a travelers group where people make sexist and silly comments all the time, and nobody, and sometimes I will, but often nobody calls them on it. And so I think one thing people are going to do to change the culture is to make even slight provocations, like that's how you get a woman in the back, like that game designer said to me, to make them not okay, and to be like, look, dude, that's not cool. You can say it in your dude way if you want to make it easier. It's like, look, in a past generation, I totally would have beaten you up for that comment. So I think making it cool to not be the jerk, is a good way to go. I think games like Cards Against Humanity, frankly, encourage a really sexist culture and make that okay. And honestly, it didn't really surprise me when the one black man of that company came out and said, like, this company, like, not just tokenized me, but made me feel like crap, at work for a lot of these reasons. I think that a company like that encourages a certain level of racism and sexism because that's the only way you get that kind of humor. So I would just say, like, making it unacceptable in like a chill public way in settings repeatedly is one way to change things.
I did not expect this level of maturity on an episode of Why We Game. But from someone who is steeped in debate and also the ability of two-track thinking from her superpowers as a Gemini, I am not surprised. Now, there are 17 books, you said, in Judaism relating to debate?
Not exactly. I was estimating the 17, but what I was talking about is the Talmud. So if people don't know what the Talmud is, first of all, Google it, because you should definitely know what Talmud is. It is studied widely in South Korea and is why South Koreans seem to glorify certain aspects of Jewish culture. But the Talmud is, I was estimating 17. I have no idea how many it is, actually. It's a huge set of volumes, very thick volumes, where rabbis are discussing and interpreting Jewish law, which is what I call the halacha. That's the official term. And there are two versions of it, and they are studied. And they actually take, if you read a page a day, a back and front of a page a day, they take 7.5 years to read. I'm not even joking. My brother actually did this and read them in 17.5 years. And wow, it actually says 38 volumes. Interesting. So when you read the Talmud, what you read is rabbis debating the intricate details of Jewish law, everything down to how do you deal with a mouse carrying a crumb in its mouth on Pesach, for example, on Passover in your house. Like they're actually rabbis analyzing how you deal with a mouse with a crumb in its mouth in your house. Hope I'm not misquoting that part. People can call me on it if I am. But basically, they're debating every aspect of Jewish law, including many about women. And by the way, this is all men discussing women over the centuries in these volumes. And I mean, just because there were only male rabbis at the time, right? And so I was just making the point to you earlier before the call that I'm all about, controversy and debate and come from, different Jewish subcultures where that's highly encouraged and you argue and then you go out for dinner together or you go out for drinks.
I love that. You said earlier that you were not much of a fan of cancel culture, save for the rapers, and I can get behind that, but it seems like that the right wing in this country is finally starting to understand how to use social media to grouse about people saying something that they don't like. And I'm gonna say something unpopular, but I feel like I need to pick a side if I'm gonna be honest with my audience. But I don't think Whoopi Goldberg needed to get suspended for saying something dumb. And I understand why they did it, but I don't think Ernie Gygax and TSR should have got banned. I think that you let them come to the show and you let them deal with the blowback in person and they get sales or they don't and what have you. And man, I'm super uncomfortable because I'll see people on one side of an issue say, dude, I'm so glad that Ernie's gone. Why are you getting rid of Whoopi? I'm so glad Whoopi is gone for 2 weeks. Why? Ernie didn't do anything wrong like this. We live in this world where if you apply enough social pressure to people because something was said that bothers you or a gesture was made or an eye roll was done that bothers you, you get exiled. That fucking scares me. It scares me.
So what's the question?
So the question is that as someone who appreciates debate and depolarizing a situation and trying to bring us back together in a more reasonable fashion, how do we handle that, right? And I know that's a big question and it doesn't relate to gaming, but what standard should we have, right? Is it okay to just we banish people because a vocal group of people say get rid of this person from the space without any sort of prosecution or evidence or what have you? Like, is that okay?
No, most of the time. So do you want me to solve cancel culture in the next 2 minutes?
No,
I know, but if you want me to, I'll try.
Yeah, no, if you can. If you want to, do you need to go get a Yale sweatshirt? Like, I'll wait.
No,
I'm kidding. I find intellect intimidating. I certainly do. But yeah, the Ernie Gygax thing stuck in my craw. I watched that video, right? Like I dissected it. I watched it again and again and again, and I get it. But by the same token, when he is removed from the space, and I don't know, if Whoopi Goldberg, God forbid, if she had lost her job as opposed to a 2-week suspension, I'm terrified by that. I'm terrified that you can make a sound with your mouth and people can destroy your career. And it's happened a couple times in the gaming industry. And it doesn't seem appropriate to me. The response seems disproportionate. So yeah, I guess related to gaming, and I can't say on the record to whom I spoke, but I brought this issue up to some people in Gamma that at the time before new elections were a big deal. And essentially it was, oh, well, we're free companies to make the decisions that we want to make, whether it was ethically, morally, et cetera, ambiguous, blah, blah, blah. So yeah, what should be our standard as a gaming industry? And should Gamma make a standard? So yes, Molly, now I've circuitously, I've taken quite the route to get here, but yeah, what is Gamma's responsibility or the industry's responsibility when situations like that occur? Should we draft a code of conduct?
I'm going to pick up on a thread you said earlier and then tie it into my answer about how to solve cancel culture in the gaming industry.
Yeah.
So you mentioned that the right is up in arms about cancel culture on the left. What's really interesting is, do you know who's mostly responsible for banning books right now? It's actually the right.
Right.
That is a form of cancel culture as well.
And it's fucking terrifying. I'm like, Jesus Christ. I mean, seriously, you want to ban mouse or you...
The right is banning a lot of books, and a lot of them have to do with race or gender or sexuality. And so they're involved in their own form of cancel culture. And what I would say is, let's look to the right for a lesson. What happens when you ban a book? I bet you know this.
I know that Mouse is doing unbelievably well on Amazon, and there's a comic book store in Tennessee that I saw that is literally sending Mouse to people for free. If he's got copies of it, he's mailing it to you.
Boom. There you go. What is a great way to give wonderful publicity to issues and people you don't want to endorse? Ban them.
So here's what I want to know, and the conspiracy theorist in me wants to know how these people are involved with Amazon, what their stocks look like, and what kind of relationship they have with subsidiaries of Amazon and Jeff Bezos. I think they knew exactly what they were doing. But then again, I'm a crazy person.
Well, so I would say, first of all, that people who ban anything and who cancel anyone need to know that lesson first and foremost. So spreading word about that lesson is important within any industry. If you ban or cancel someone, you're going to drive people who already agreed to them more firmly to their side. They're going to dig in their heels. Their supporters are going to dig in their heels. And you're actually creating greater division between people who might have been your ally if you really had a conversation with them. So you're actually undermining your own case when you ban someone because you're driving their popularity up with people who disagree with you. So one thing is just advancing that lesson in any platform you can. I don't have a system for how to do that on a wide scale in society. But the other thing I would say is, if you really want to win over the heart of someone, you have to sit down with them and engage in a really high level of empathic listening. And this is really hard with the worst people, really hard. The people you disagree with strongly politically, with people who sexually harass someone, right, really hard. But my professor wrote what is now the number 44 book on Amazon. She just launched it this week, and I'm on her book launch team. I have a book launch actually about an hour and a half with her. And her book is called Influence is Your Superpower. And she teaches it based on her class, which is the most popular class at Yale School of Management, where I went, called Mastering Influence and Persuasion. I didn't actually take the class because she taught a lot of influence through fundraising, and I already had worked as a fundraiser. But it's the most popular class at Yale School of Management. And she said, I saw a lot of really good people with good ideas not getting the word out there. They didn't know how to influence people. One of the things she teaches is sit down with people, find out where they're coming from, figure out, I would add to that, figure out where their pain lies, where their passion lies, what's driving them. And then just through asking them some questions, they want to listen to you. And actually, you can come to a point where you realize you agree on some really high level values once you engage with someone politically, or once you engage with someone you disagree with on other things besides politics. At a high level, a lot of conservatives and liberals, for example, want the exact same things. They don't want there to be a high level of poverty in society. Now, there are people who actually do. They want to keep the poor as low as they can. We're not talking about those people, right? We're not talking about fascists. We're not talking about anarchists. We're not talking about people at either extreme, right? But most people are actually here along a spectrum. They're not here, right? And at a high level, we have the same values. And while this is well off gaming, I'll get back to gaming in a second. I would say that in the game industry, instead of canceling someone entirely, unless, as I said earlier, unless they've actually committed some horrific, even illegal act, then instead of canceling someone for a softer thing, I want to soft because I feel like soft porn is a thing. Instead of canceling someone for a lesser sin, actually sit in a room, have people who are kind of like a, cultural team or the, cultural safety team or whatever you want to call it at a convention, for example, at a trade show. Have them be the person who sits down and is trained in these empathic listening skills and meet in the middle. What I've seen, for example, is someone who is on the right in my group, Braver Angels, who said, I was on the right. He's a black male, which, by the way, is like only 10% of blacks actually vote Republican, for instance. So like he's already a rarity, and he's used to being an outlier among other black people in the U.S. just because, as you may know, like 98% of black women voted for, even Hillary, 89% of black men voted for Hillary, et cetera. So, but he said, the more I'm here, the more I become more purple. Purple is what we call in Braver Angels, my depolarization group. When you're like leaning left is leaning blue, leaning right is leaning red. When you're more purple, it's like, I'm beginning to see the other side, And so what I would say is I've seen that from both sides in my political depolarization group. The more you have a greater understanding of people's stories and where they came from and their own sources, which are very different from your news sources, right? The more you start to gradually understand where they're coming from and say like, okay, I can see what I have that viewpoint. I could even see adopting part of that viewpoint, So what I would say is this, in the game industry, if we just practice those kind of listening skills with each other and sit down with people who disagree with us, we might actually be able to pull people to meet in the middle instead of further alienating and further isolating them, which is what happens when you cancel someone.
I assume that philosophy has aided you tremendously in playtesting. I
just always assume my playtesters are right and I'm wrong. Like my playtesters are usually brilliant people who are dead on with their, critiques. So I don't really need to meet in the middle. I'm just like, yeah, you're right. We should change that.
Do you playtest with other designers or do you playtest with strangers? Is it a mix?
By and large, it's strangers, not industry people, just people who are big gamers.
Do you find that is a more convenient audience or that it is an audience that provides a different and specific type of feedback?
It's really convenient because I have large pools of people in my life I can draw playtesters from who are not industry people. So it is really convenient. And also, at the end of the day, like we're making mass market games. I mean, How to Lose a Guy in 1 DM, the game coming out this summer, or Just Tell Me What to Do, a party game of all the advice you never needed. These are games that appeal to anyone who just likes to make up funny arguments or like make fun of each other, which is almost everyone. And so I think that if you only tested or mostly tested with game designers, for instance, you could get highly analytical about something that at the end of the day is like about like a silly, funny, quick joke, Yeah. So I think it's good to test a mass market game with the kind of people who are likely to play your game, which is, could be anyone from an occasional party gamer who actually really likes, I want to say Twilight Imperium or whatever, to someone who just only plays party games, which is actually a huge percentage of people in my network, to be fair.
Molly, so before we sign out, I just want to make sure that people, if they want to pursue you professionally and contact you about games, game design, or about your diversity project with Gamma, where can people find you?
Sure. So the best way to kind of keep an eye on what's going on in our company, whether with new game launches or covering, material from our current line of games, is definitely Instagram. And we're just Flying Leap Games on Instagram. Second best is probably Facebook, also Flying Leap Games on Facebook. And I use Twitter when I remember Twitter exists. So that's probably a third one. As far as actually getting in touch with me, if you're a game designer or publisher who just wants support, maybe you want to apply for the fellowship. Maybe you just want to know, how do I start selling to retail? If you email me at flyingleapgames@gmail.com, I can send you my hour-and-a-half presentation, which is just online, on how to, 9 ways to sell to retail for indie and small designers. If you want to talk about playtesting and maybe trade some playtesting, I'd love that. Always happy to have more playtesters. We have, as I mentioned, a brand new game coming out, Just Tell Me What to Do, a party game of all the advice you never needed. I would love to just, be able to send people in media copies and have them, talk about it, play it, maybe be in some material. So if you really like being on stage, hey, I acted for 14 years. I get it. I like being the center of attention. If you are someone who likes being at the center of attention, contact me because I have lots of ways I can make you the center of attention and would love to do that. And and lastly, if you have really random one-off questions that just come up, about our games, about how to promote party games, about whether a game is worth attending, the quickest way to reach me any given day is just to Instagram chat me. And I usually look at that, 1 or 2 times a day at least.
Molly, it has been an absolute pleasure. I can't guarantee that I am going to be at GTS this year. If I get to see you in person, I certainly hope to. I wish you the best and thank you so much for your time today. I really, really appreciate it.
That would be awesome. And I do want to flag one thing that I didn't mention, if that's okay.
Please.
If you are not Jewish and you buy Jewish Card Revoked and you play it, tell me if I'm wrong and you hated it, or tell me if I'm wrong and you started getting people coming to your house and saying that you ought to be reported to the ADL, which is the Anti-Defamation League. That keeps an eye on anti-Semitism. So if you play it and you have better answers than I came up with, I also want to know, because we are more than happy to sit down with any non-Jew listening to this call and debate better answers to questions like, what's the most Jewish ailment, which usually yelling is the winner, or severe anxiety is the winner. We're happy to debate what the best Jewish guilt trip is, and we're definitely happy to debate who the nerdiest male in Jewish pop culture is with you. As a non-Jew, your opinion is 100% as completely valid as any Jewish person, because I'm sure as long as you know the word schmuck and klutz, you're totally well-versed in our culture.
I want to do a Jew versus Catholic thing, right?
Yes,
like a tug of war guilt off game, right? Where it's sort of like war, where you're trying to collect more cards, right? And so you're voting on, is this more Jewish or more Catholic? And we have to have even teams like code words. But dude, I grew up Catholic, and I'm telling you, things I love about Catholicism. We love guilt. Every time I walked into a church, I was like, Jesus Christ, that dude suffered. But then also, dude, we've got magic items. We've got magic spells. We've got demons. We've got demons that we're casting out. We've got afterlife. We've got this little place called Limbo. It's amazing. It's a super, super kick-ass religion. I adore it. But the guilt, whoo, I always wanted to have a guilt off with a Jew.
I'm in. Let's do it and let's film it too.
Oh, I think that would be fantastic.
I'm so in.
Do you drink wine?
Yeah, but only because I have to sometimes.
Oh no!
I'm just kidding. Actually, no. I like wine if it tastes like a mixture of Sprite and champagne, which is Moscato d'Asti.
Gotcha. See, I'm French German, and so overindulgence, drinking, and desiring to be the center of attention is what I do. But anyway, I should sign out and let you do your thing. So ladies, gentlemen, folks, humans, people, whatever it is that you do, this has been Why We Game. Editing is by me, Brodor. Music is by 99 Instrumentals. You should check out Wing It. It's actually a great game for the initiated and the uninitiated. And just so you know, folks, I often find things confusing, like my distant cousin Arnold.
There's always a time when I'm not really wondering what is going on because I'm not